It's pretty wild when you think about it, but companies with inclusive cultures are actually twice as likely to hit or even beat their financial targets. It's a huge stat, and today we're going to unpack exactly why that is. We're diving deep into what it really takes to build a workforce that's not just getting by, but is genuinely thriving in our crazy, fast-paced world. And it all boils down to three core skills: agility, adaptability, and cultural competence.
So let me just ask you this, right off the bat. Is your organization afraid to fail? I remember working with this one company, and they were so terrified of making a mistake, of putting anything out there that wasn't 100% perfect, they held back a new product for months. And in that time, their competitor, who was willing to take a smart risk, launched something similar and just took over the market. How you answer this question, well, it says a whole lot about your organization's future.
And that fear of failure we were just talking about, honestly, it's just a symptom of a much bigger problem, what we can call the conformity challenge. So in this first section, we're going to look at how this growing pressure to just play it safe is quietly killing innovation and making our companies way less resilient than they need to be.
Now, this is a really interesting idea, the decline of deviance. And look, this isn't about being a rebel just for the heck of it. It's about a serious drop in our intellectual courage and curiosity. I mean, think about it for a second. When was the last time someone on your team really, truly challenged a core assumption? Or pitched a completely different way of doing things, even if it sounded a little out there at first? If you can't remember, you might be seeing the decline of deviance in action, and that is a major threat to your ability to innovate.
And this pressure to conform is hitting us at the absolute worst time. Because right now, there are these three massive forces completely changing the game. First, globalization is connecting us to literally everyone everywhere. Second, tech, especially AI, is just rewriting the rules for how we do our jobs. And third, our workplaces are more diverse than they have ever been. In this new world, the old, rigid, cookie-cutter ways of working aren't just inefficient anymore. They are a straight-up recipe for disaster.
Okay, so we know conformity is a huge challenge, but what's really driving it? To get that, we have to go a little deeper. In this section, we're going to dig into the root causes, which often hide in the subtle and sometimes not so subtle forms of workplace oppression that create that fear and make people afraid to speak up.
And here are some of the common things that build those barriers. Some are really obvious, but a lot of them are way more subtle, like anchoring bias, where we just get stuck on the first thing we hear. And then there are things like mansplaining, where a man explains something to a woman like she doesn't know, often about something she's an expert in. Or whitesplaining, which is the same idea but across racial lines. These actions, whether they're intentional or not, systematically shut down important voices and rob the entire team of valuable expertise.
And this is where it gets really clear that we're not just talking about a few isolated moments. This is a powerful framework from the philosopher Iris Marion Young called the 5 Faces of Oppression. It helps us see that this isn't about individual prejudice, it's about systems. Take marginalization, for instance. At work, it's not just being left out of a meeting. It's being consistently passed over for the big projects, for mentorship, for any real chance to move up. This model shows us how oppression gets woven right into the fabric of an organization.
Okay, now that we have a clearer picture of the challenges, let's flip the script and talk about solutions. I know this stuff can feel heavy, but there is absolutely a positive path forward. So in this section, we'll get into the 3 essential skills that are the perfect antidote to these problems. They are the foundation of a truly modern and resilient workforce.
So what are these 3 essential skills? Well, let's think of it this way. Agility, that's like a cheetah, right? Able to pivot on a dime to chase down an opportunity. Adaptability, that's like a chameleon, able to adjust and thrive no matter the environment. And cultural competence, that's the bedrock for everything else. It's like the deep roots of a giant oak tree, keeping you stable in any storm. Put them all together, and you've got a workforce that's not just resilient, it's unstoppable.
So how do we actually put cultural competence into practice? Well, you've got 2 models here. For years, the goal was the melting pot, on the left, assimilation. It's like a bland soup where everyone is supposed to give up what makes them different and just become the same. But the way forward, the modern model, is the fruit salad, on the right, acculturation. It's this vibrant mix where every single piece keeps its own unique identity, and together they create something way more interesting and delicious than any one part could be on its own.
And when you combine that cultural competence with real action, you get cultural agility. This is so much more than just knowing about different cultures. It's about being able to move between them with ease and respect. It's like being a cultural chameleon, really, able to connect with anyone from any walk of life. And let me tell you, this skill is in incredibly high demand, but it's in very, very short supply in our world. Okay, so we know what skills we need. They're powerful. But how do we actually grow them inside our organizations? Because it's not enough to just hope for the best. In this next section, we're going to walk through a really practical 5-pillar framework that leaders can use to intentionally build a workplace that's more responsive and agile.
So, how do we build an organization that can actually thrive in today's complex world? Well, it all comes down to these 5 key pillars. Think of these as the essential building blocks for a truly innovative and responsive workplace. Ready to see what they are?
All right, here it is. This is the blueprint for a better workplace. These 5 pillars, which we're about to break down one by one, are the foundation. We're talking about promoting psychological safety, fostering cultural competence, encouraging intellectual risk-taking, implementing adult-centered learning, and finally, leveraging cultural differences for synergy.
The first pillar, and honestly, the most important one, is psychological safety. There was a huge study at Google that found this was the #1 predictor of high-performing teams. When people feel safe enough to take risks, to ask questions, to be vulnerable, that's when they innovate and solve the tough problems. As a leader, creating this environment of trust is your #1 job, period.
Pillar number 2 is all about actively building those cultural skills. And let's be real, this isn't about some one-off, check-the-box diversity training. This is about building a culture where everyone is always learning. Maybe you set up a mentorship program that pairs people from different backgrounds, or you offer immersive international projects. And of course, it all has to start at the top. As a leader, you have to model the inclusive behavior you want to see every single day.
Which brings us to pillar 3, encouraging intellectual risk-taking. Remember that decline of deviance we talked about in the beginning? Well, this is how you fight back. At Pixar, they have this thing called the Brain Trust, where their top creative people openly and honestly critique each other's work. They do it because they know it's all about making the best movie possible. They've built a culture where it is safe to fail, and that is exactly why they are so consistently creative.
The 4th pillar is all about learning designed for adults. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't teach a kid to ride a bike by showing them a PowerPoint, would you? No, you'd put them on the bike and let them try. It's the same for us. Adults learn best by doing. So, ditch the boring lectures and use practical things like case studies, role-playing, and hands-on projects that actually make the learning stick.
And that brings us to our final pillar, synergy. This is the magic. It's what happens when you bring together a diverse group of people and they create something that's way greater than the sum of its parts. Think about the Avengers, right? Each hero has unique skills, but when they team up, they're unstoppable. The same thing is true for your team. When you truly embrace and leverage diversity, you can unlock a level of innovation you never even thought was possible.
So, we've laid out the entire framework for building a better workplace. But a framework is just a tool, right? It's up to you as a leader to be the one to actually pick it up and use it. So in this final section, let's talk about your critical role in making all this change happen.
This quote really says it all. Your team takes its cues from you, not from some policy manual. I once had a boss who talked a big game about work-life balance, but he was sending emails at all hours of the night, on weekends. His actions sent a much louder message than his words ever could. As a leader, you are always on stage. Your team is always watching, and they are learning from your example. So you have to make sure you're setting the right one. I get it. This can all seem like a lot, but you don't have to change everything overnight. Real, lasting change starts with one thing, just one small step. Maybe it's as simple as making sure every single person gets a chance to speak in your next team meeting. Or maybe it's setting aside 1 hour a week for your team to just brainstorm crazy ideas with no judgment. These small steps create a ripple effect, and that's how you start a wave of positive change. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. What is one intellectual risk you will encourage your team to take this week? And maybe more importantly, what are you going to do to create the safety they need to actually take that risk? Because the future of your organization really does depend on it.